Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to
CKLW, the Motor City.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dan MacDonald from AM 800 CKLW, and I still get goosebumps every single morning when I say those iconic call letters, CKLW, because of what we just saw right there, the legacy, the legend that this iconic radio station is specifically for us here. Thank you all for coming tonight to remember the Big Eight, and most importantly, remember Rosalie. You know, when we kicked off the evening tonight with Bob Seger, heavy music, that was, I know it's everyone here and everyone clapping along like it was a concert. That was amazing. That was the song just personally for me that started it all for me on my Fisher-Price record player. My mom was noticing, you seem to really like the music, Dan. And I said, I do. And she goes, how about you dive into my record collection? And I looked through, I thought, wow. John Denver, never heard of him. Glenn Campbell, who are the Doors? Who are the Eagles? What's this strange record that says CKLW on it? And I didn't even really know what a record was at that time. I was 6 years old. I put it on side 2, and the first song I heard was Bob Seger, Heavy Music, and it switched something in my brain, and it changed the trajectory of my life. So it is full circle to be a part, a small part, very different than it was back in the day, but it's such an honor to be a part of the CKLW story, and it's really, really an honor to be here tonight with all of you. Many of you who are just learning what CKLW was, and many of you who were there living it all. You know, today, was anyone at the statue unveiling today? Was that not amazing? And Burton Cummings showed up. We saw him in the video just now. He gave a very passionate speech thanking Rosalie Trombley for his career. We have an amazing history in this city. The statue unveiling, the story of the Big Eight is one of the things that makes Windsor so effortless. The statue of Rosalie that it faces, beautifully sculpted by Donna Jean Main, by the way. I love that it is of Rosalie facing Detroit. She's planted here on our beautiful riverfront, facing Detroit, which that skyline is as home to, I think, all of us as the buildings here in Windsor are. And I love what that statue says. Tonight is about stories and sounds that connected us, the universal language of music. And just like lightning striking, you cannot plan it. You can't replicate it. And just like the music, the personalities, the team behind the Big Eight were nothing short of electric, like lightning. It was a moment in time, and it was a perfect moment. Just some of the names that graced the airwaves, some who are joining us on stage, some who are in the audience, some who could not be here tonight, some who are no longer with us. Jim Jackson, Scott Miller, Terry Scott, Susan Nixon, Gary Morningmouth Burbank, Big Jim Edwards, Brother Bill Gable, Pat Holliday, Steve Hunter, Super Max Kinkle, Walt Baby Love, Charlie O'Brien, Ted the Bear Richards, Mike Rivers, Duke Roberts, Charlie Van Dyke, Johnny Williams, Newsman Randy Carlisle, Grant Hudson, Byron McGregor, and speaking of which, somebody else who broke a lot of gender barriers, the first female helicopter traffic news reporter in North America. She's here tonight, JoJo Shetty McGregor. And of course, the person we are remembering today, music director Rosalie Trombley, who became famous, legendary, for being the girl with the golden ear, blurring lines, gender lines, racial lines, rock and roll, R&B. What I've been hearing as a common theme throughout the day today, it was about the music, good music. Important music. Many believe that the integrated music playlist helped bring Detroiters together, especially during the race riots of 1967. Rosalie, hired in 63, and was accepted a position in the music library. Fall of 68 was offered the full-time position as CKLW's music director, a job she later attributed to being in the right place at the right time. And think about how many careers might have been different if she wasn't in the right place at the right time. That perfect storm, and then the lightning that strikes. This seems to be what made the station work. Everyone from the artists who were the music they were putting out, people working the station, everyone was doing exactly what they were supposed to do at the right time, like lightning. Rosalie served as music director of CKLW from 1968 to 1984, and in November of 2021, we lost Rosalie. And at the time, we could not do a proper celebration of life to honor Rosalie. And today, with the Big 8 edition of Open Streets, the statue unveiling, the exhibition at the Chimchuk Museum, the screening tonight of Radio Revolution by Michael McNamara, who is here in the audience this evening. This event right here and now that we are all attending very much has that feeling, a celebration of life for Rosalie Trombley, filled with nostalgia, but much the same way the spirit of music is eternal, her influence will live on forever. As her son, Tim Trombley, said earlier this morning at that statue unveiling, Rosalie was the original influencer. Her birthday is tomorrow, making this evening extra special. The stories, as you can imagine, are infinite, much like the sounds, the eternal, glorious, timeless songs and voices broadcast out of that 50,000-watt blowtorch. And tonight is about listening to some of that music, and I know you all are music fans in here tonight. It's about unlocking those memories in a way that only music can do, and hearing some of those stories that never get old from some of the people who lived them. It is my pleasure to welcome to the stage tonight, roaring through the hits every night on the Big 8, evening jock Ted the Bear Richards. The veteran radio manager programmer whose 50-year career includes being the final top 40 programmer of the Big 8, internationally known air talent Pat Holliday. Founder and CEO of Afterplay Entertainment, executive or co-founder of networks including VH1, MTV, the Box Television Network, and also program director at CKLW. He is also the DJ featured prominently in Jefferson Starships, We Built This City, Les Garland. And last but not least, someone who I know, we saw him today at the statue unveiling, and I know a lot of Rosalie's family, friends, children are here tonight. I want to welcome to the stage Tim Trombley.
Driving across the Golden Gate Bridge on another beat.
It's going to be that kind of night, I can tell. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for coming here to this day. Does Ted need a mic? I think Ted needs a mic down there. There we go.
Testing.
There we go. Perfect. So just a little bit, if we can talk, we'll go around here before we listen to some music and watch some videos and whatnot, but we'll go around and talk about your time, how you got into the CKLW and your time there. Tim, we'll start with you. This day has to be an emotional day for you.
Oh boy, it's been a very emotional day for me, for my brother and sister. I don't know what to say. I mean, I said it earlier this morning. It's like she raised 3 kids on her own. I don't know how she did it with having such an amazing job and such a demanding job. Just a remarkable woman, you know, with such an innate gift for music. It's still, for me, 64 years later, you know, hard to figure out how she did it, how she balanced her personal life, raising 3 kids as a single mother on her own, and how she had this gift for picking music. It you know, truthfully, in a lot of ways, serendipitous that this opportunity came to her literally the summer that our father walked out on the family. So it's just, you know, I believe things happen in life for a reason, and I believe Rosalie was meant to bring her gift to the world through her innate ability to pick hit records.
Amazing. Les, your time as music, as program director at the legendary CKLW, can you reflect a bit on that time?
I don't remember anything. I'm a small town boy from a small town in Missouri, and I got lucky and went off to the big city and did things those big city boys didn't know how to do. We were guilty of having a lot of fun. Everything that we did, I was noticing as I was watching the video, there was not one photo of Rosalie which she was not having fun. And she transmitted that. It was powerful. And she didn't just walk into a room, she made an entrance into a room. And she was just this magical lady. We've talked a lot today and read and heard a lot about golden ears. She had a golden heart and a golden soul and a golden brain and a golden presence about herself. That's how music translated through her body in knowing what people wanted to hear. What would be a hit song. She could hear a hit record like nobody I ever met in my life. She was, honestly, I don't remember her ever being wrong. Ever. And that's unheard of. Nobody bats 1,000 in music. But gosh, okay, so CKLW for me was this monster radio station that I had heard of. And I got lucky. There was a guy we talked about, probably no one in this room has ever heard of a guy called Bill Drake. Yeah? Legendary Bill Drake. Better known as Phil Yarborough from Atlanta, Georgia. And he discovered me when I was about 23 years old, actually. And it was an accident. I ended up going to work for Bill Drake. Funny sidebar story, and this is not about me, but it's how I ended up here. And I was in Fresno at the pilot station for the Drake radio format. The Drake radio format was on the biggest radio stations in America, if not the world. And it was called the Drake format. That would be KHJ in Los Angeles, KFRC in San Francisco, WRKO in Boston, HBQ in Memphis, CKLW in Detroit, which was owned by RKO in the beginning. It was an RKO station, and then laws came down where Americans couldn't own radio stations in Canada, and Canadians couldn't own radio stations in America, which is how it fell into the hands of Bayton Broadcasting. And let me tell you something. It was just hearing the letters CKLW. I stopped calling great radio personalities like the ones on this stage here tonight. I stopped calling them DJs. Anybody can be a DJ, but not very many people can be a radio personality and can have a skill to communicate with the audience like Pat, Teddy, the staff at that great radio station. It was legendary. Everybody wanted to work at CKLW. It was either there, KFRC, KHJ, and occasionally WLS in Chicago. That's where every young, up-and-coming, striving air personality wanted to be. And it came my way, and it was a bit of a miracle. We need those in life. And I've looked back on it in some retrospect, and that's when I was lucky enough to hop on that big, gigantic wave and surf that wave right on through the MTV experience, VH1, and the things that come my way. Had it not been for CKLW, I actually believe none of that would have ever happened, to me personally. It was really jumping on the gigantic wave. And just riding it, really, more riding it. If you try to steer it, you're going to die. He didn't do that. And my memories just go on and on. I could sit here, I could tell you a million stories of things that keep coming back, and certainly the last 12 hours today, it's just been unbelievable. But I just can't take my mind off of the great times. It was the most fun. People really cared for each other, genuinely loved each other, had each other's back. And I do not remember any, what you would call it, disgruntled people complaining. CKLW was a place you looked forward to going into because it was a blast, and it was entertainment, and it was fun, and I was noted to be a guy who didn't need a lot of sleep. And I was famously there at 7 o'clock in the morning, and sometimes I came from the wrong side of the clock. But it was good being there. We enjoyed being there. It was our life. It was our life. And I don't know that exists anymore. I'm fearful that it doesn't in radio. I think you'd hear it. I learned how to go into a town and I could listen to a radio station for 3 hours and tell you if these people are having fun or not. You could feel it. You could hear it coming out the transmitter. CKLW was all of that. I mentioned something to the guys today that some of them didn't even know, but we tried to do some really cool things back then. And we had tried to cut a deal with the CRTC, and we needed permission to do this. But, CK was 50,000 watts on 800, and you've heard the stories. 38 states in America at night. You talk about a big wave. And I found a radio station down in Mexico on the other side of the border in Texas, 50,000 watts on 800. I went to them to see if they'd be interested in simulcasting with us. And we were going to put the big 8 on 2 signals, 800, 50,000 watts, covering all of North America. And we came close to pulling that off. So I went to the big 8 and became a big thinker. And I'll jump out here, but it was a highlight of my life. In my radio years and the things that have come my way in my life, CKLW is at the top of that list.
Amazing. Mr. Don Holiday, your time at CKLW, how you got into it, just your initial thoughts and memories.
For me, it was really interesting. The first time I heard CKLW, I was working a tiny little station in upstate New York, and I'm playing, it's Christmas Eve, and I'm playing Christmas sounds. And now, El Martino, brought to you by so-and-so funeral home, and you play no, honest to God, you play half the side, you turn it over and say something like that again, and you play it again. And I'm bored out of my mind, so I went over to this was in the U.S., so upstate New York. In the U.S., they have this EBS system where they, you'd hear it on the Detroit station yelling, this is the test of the emergency, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so I went over to that thing because it's a big tuner, and I thought, okay, this is crazy. So I start tuning, and everybody's doing what I'm doing. And it's like super boring. And then I come up around 800, that I know now, and it's like, what is this station? Because there's no Christmas music. They are rocking on Christmas Eve, full tilt. And it's CK, it's the first time I heard this, it's like, wow, this is awesome. What is this all about? Found out more, flash forward a year later, this speaks to how big, and again, I'm in the middle of New York State, kind of almost on the Hudson River. I'm now in Hartford, I'm doing nights at 6 to 10, and I'm copying CKLW, and I'm mailing air checks here to try to get a job. No, honestly, yeah. So, I'm working 6 to 10 because at 10 o'clock at night when I would get off the air and go home, or to go out and get something to eat, the loudest station on the dial in Hartford, Connecticut, 1,000 kilometers from here, was CKLW. It was beyond being a local. So, that's how big that thing was, and it's like, I got to work there. So, eventually, I got hired here, and we'll talk more about this, but I just find this amazing. The first day I got here, I went into we were on Riverside Drive, where CBC is now. So I go into the lunchroom, and Rosalie's office in the music library is like, it's kind of like vending machine, door. Oh, okay. So I kind of look in, and there's 2 ladies in there, and I walk in, and I just get in the door. What do you want? Who are you? I was like, okay, here we go. And I said, well, I'm the new jock, I'm the new guy out there, and I'm a kid, I think I'm 22 or 21. And she goes, I don't care, we're working, it's, we're doing the charts, get out. So she throws me out, and so I keep going back. And so, this is kind of like the way she is. And then all of a sudden, I'm in the same thing, I'm out there, because I'm definitely afraid of sort of walking in. I kind of go by the door, and now it's not happening. She comes walking out, because she would do this with a lot of people. She would give them shots at things that you wouldn't normally get a shot at. She goes, you want to meet Jose Feliciano? And I go, yeah, for sure. Okay, come with me, but don't talk. Honest God. So she takes me into the office, she goes, sit in that chair right there, don't say a word. And I'm sitting there, all of a sudden, national promo guy comes in, there's Jose Feliciano, and there's some woman there with him, I don't know, girlfriend or something, I don't know. And, they talk and whatever, and I'm just like, wow, this is really awesome. And then, anyway, from that point on, it's like, I could walk into the room, and I spent hours in that room learning radio, because that was like a doctorate course in music and other things that was priceless for later on, for the rest of my career, is very cool. But that's and then actually I used to babysit for Tim and the kids. Yeah, it was like to speak to what's saying. It was a really close-knit, close-knit group of people. We were all sort of family to ourselves. And man, you don't see that in any business hardly. And even then, but for sure not now very much. Yeah.
Yeah. Coolest babysitter ever, first of all. Right?
I was just a kid, I didn't know what I was doing. It's like, where's the SpaghettiOs? Anywhere here or what?
Last but certainly not least, Ted the Bear Richards. Your time at CKLW when you reflect back.
Well, for me, it was an awesome experience coming to CKLW. And okay, thank you. I always get the older mics, no matter where I go. But I got used to that. So the first time I heard Boss Radio with Bill Drake, I was in the military in California, and I heard this station called KFRC, which this man, Les Garland, when he left CKLW, he went to Boston, I believe Boston, and then to KFRC and made that station like just a monster AM station, the big 610. But I was in California in '67, I heard Boss Radio, we get the more music, the jocks were just awesome, and I said, hey, I want to get into this somehow when I get out of the military. So anyway, long story short, I ended up going to Africa for a while in the Air Force, and I said to my roommate one day, maybe one day I'll go to a 50,000 watt station in Canada. Now, I don't know why I said that. I didn't even know of any stations in Canada, but that came out of my mouth. Anyway, I get out, I get hired to go to Jacksonville, Florida, where we had the Drake jingles, the more music, which you've seen in the Rise and Fall. And so we were doing the Drake copycat there and doing our best. And after a couple of years, you have a goal in mind. You want to make the top 10 markets before you're 25. That was my goal. And so I sent a tape to CKLW. They had an opening for weekends. And I just scribbled down to Alden, I don't want a weekend job, but if you get something full time, I'd like to, work for you. Anyway, that's how that happened, and a little bit later I'll tell you how me and Alden met, and I met Rosalie for the first time. But to me, CKLW was the only station that I ever wanted to work for, and really never leave. I love that station. I got there in March of '72, and I didn't even leave until me and Pat and Rosalie and everybody else in December of '84 said, you have to leave now. So it was over, and so at least we got our severance pay, and when you're there from 72 to 85, it's a pretty good check. And so I went out and bought a Hyundai. First year, never buy a car made in the first year. Oh my gosh. I could tell you a story when I was working in Detroit, living in Windsor, and that car broke down at 4:30 a.m. in the morning on 75. I thought I was going to be, disappearing. It was crazy. I got rid of that car. So anyway, but that was the only place I wanted to work. It was so good, and I went around singing jingles. It was the only station when I was not on the air, I listened to the jocks on the Big 8. That was the only station I listened to. So, anyway.
Amazing. Well, is everyone ready to listen to some music tonight? It's a listening party, it's some storytelling. Let's do it. A legendary for breaking a lot of artists and a lot of Canadian artists too, putting a lot of Canadian artists on the map. Burton Cummins this morning said he toured with the Canadian flag as his backdrop in their heyday, which was amazing to hear. Imagine seeing that. So we'll give a listen right now to some music about the process of finding and breaking Canadian artists. Do the songs bring you back or what? Right?
Good sound system in here.
It sounds pretty decent here in the Capitol Theatre. Some good sound. Just the impact of Canadian artists. We heard the guests who obviously David Foster with Skylark, 5-man electrical band, Bachman Turner Overdrive, Andy Kim, Edward Bear. Pat, maybe you could even talk about this. Just what it meant to be a Canadian artist to be played on the Big 8.
It would be huge. One of the things about this, which is really a testament to Rosalie's ear, in the beginning, Canadian content there was only a handful of good artists at the time because it was a new industry. Like it really, like now it's like, okay, there's tons of Canadian artists that are worldwide everywhere, but there was only a few then, but the station, especially being on the border, you know, we had to kick in 30%, which is essentially roughly 200 songs a day. You know, and you can't, you know, you got to keep repeating stuff, so you want really good songs. But it was the infancy of the recording industry in Canada. It didn't really hit stride until around 2004, 2005. That's when, you know, Carly Rae Jepsen, Bieber, and all the, you know, all of a sudden there's a bazillion great Canadian artists, and the industry came up to it. Producers, writers, everything. You know, it's like, you know, they could hold its own anywhere in the world. But in the beginning, it was tough. So she had to hunt through album after album and single after single to try to find ones where it's like, okay, we're going to have to play this, and it, you know, it's good enough. We can do it and still have a radio station at the same time that every other AM radio station in North America was getting pummeled by FM radio stations, and you know, and ultimately switching to news talk. And CK was pretty much the last one to kind of like, okay, you know, you kind of can't go any farther, and that's like another 10, 12-year ride. More than that, that's like more than a 14-year ride from that point, because of her ear sifting through so many songs to come up with enough for us to play. You know, if we anywhere inside Canada wouldn't have been a big deal, but being on the border with 40 Detroit stations, it's like, whoo, you got a chore there. To kind of build a radio station, you know, with stuff that you wouldn't normally play. Again, now not a big deal, but back then, so I mean, that's, you know, my thought. In addition to, you know, like, you know, Terry Jackson, the Poppy Family, and you know, and Edwin Bear and those other ones. I mean, you know, I saw her a bazillion times go out of her way to make calls, you know, into the U.S. You know, I was one of the national people. No, I got a song here. This is really a legitimate hit. What's that about? Well, here, I'm going to send it to you. And she'd explain it all, and sometimes play it on the phone a little bit, which they probably couldn't hear real well. But, you know, ones that would have never seen the light of day, not in a million years, because nobody would even know about them. And, yeah.
Sorry, Pat. I'm reminded of something that radio once owned, discovery. I bet most of the people here, you remember that first time you heard a song that became your favorite song, and you discovered it on radio. It doesn't happen anymore. Today's youth generation finds a new song on TikTok, and they listen to about 17 seconds of it. They go around the house singing the hook, telling their mom and dad it's their favorite new song. They've never even heard the entire song. It's a new world out there in this digital age. There are 120,000 new songs a day going on Spotify. And somebody recently asked me in an interview what I thought about that. And I'm a bit outspoken, and I said, well, 120,000 songs a day going on Spotify to me sounds like about 119,999 pieces of crap. Rosalie could find that one song.
I almost feel like that was an advantage we had here in Windsor as a border city. We had Detroit there, and even to this day, you compare Windsor to a city like Toronto or any other city, we had different taste in music because we had that Detroit influence, and that's, at the same time, that's what kind of ended up being a border city, ended up kind of hurting the Big 8 because we had to apply CanCon laws, and that's what kind of killed the Big 8 in a weird, ironic way.
We didn't look at it like a negative. We said, let's treat this as something positive. Let's treat this as let's find some new music. Let's find new artists. Let's find a new sound. Nothing more powerful than music, right? It leaves an impression like a photo can't. It's the most powerful art form I believe there is in the world. And it served me well, that's for sure. And it started out with a young kid who fell in love with the Beatles on my transistor radio. Little would I know, 12 years later, I'd smoke pot with the Beatles. Welcome to rock and roll. I didn't even smoke.
Well, we were talking earlier, what made the Big 8 so magic, I think, was that strange balance of professionalism and mischief. It was a fusion of the two, this professionalism and mischief and farting around that just made it so magical. And I think that's, you can't replicate that. Speaking of magical, Tim, I know your mom, Rosalie, she had a love for R&B music, and I want to do you want to hear some more music? Do you want to hear some R&B? And let's hear some R&B, introducing some R&B to the top 40.
I would like to say one thing, that we called that soul or R&B, you know, these categories, these names. We never thought of music in colors, ever. Great songs, pop songs, rock songs. We played great songs. And if those don't give you a cold chill, check your soul meter.
Yeah, that was great. That makes me want to get back into radio again. Hearing that.
I'm starting tomorrow.
That was a good station, yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, more music and less Garland.
And the Me and Mrs. Jones, I still remember Me and Mrs. Jones from his album 360 Degrees. And then Stories, Brother Louie, Hot Chocolate did it first, and Rosalie got Stories' version of Brother Louie, and it just took off. So that was awesome, but that's what she did. You know, she could take songs and say, hey, this is a little bit better, but Hot Chocolate had no fear. They bounced back, as you heard, with You Sexy Thing, which I love that record. That was great. I mean, you couldn't sit still in the studio when you're playing that, right? But
I had this gigantic sound system in my office that we might remember, and it would rattle the walls. And Rosalie would come storming in, just like that statue. I've seen that dance before. You gotta hear this. You gotta hear this. And we put it on and rattle the walls. People would come from other parts of the building. It was that sort of excitement that happened when you heard these songs, that we were the lucky people that got to play them for other people. What a lucky gig. And they actually paid us to do this?
yeah, they did. And one thing that Rosie and I had in common, we both liked soul music. And in Jacksonville, it was kind of like a Detroit, Washington, D.C., Memphis market. We had a lot of heavy R&B on our playlist in Jacksonville. So when I came up to CK, Alden was showing me around, and he took me into Rosie's office and introduced us. And I tried not to look at all the gold records on the wall and tried to pay attention as we were greeting one another, but you couldn't help it. I mean, it was flabbergasting, I guess that's the word I would be. It was strange, but we loved it, and I didn't tell her we had something in common. That I was a music director myself in Jacksonville, and I never got a gold record. But I got a thank you note from James Brown for adding Sex Machine. Sex Machine, and we added that, and you know. But anyway, I wouldn't tell her, you know, I was one because I saw all this, and it was. Well, I didn't mean it that way. Did that come out wrong?
You bet.
One of the things that I'd like to point out now, and when you go through, if your mind goes back through the songs we just heard, neither one of us wants to be the first to say goodbye, let's stay together, and so on and so forth in that vein. Any other song we play, listen carefully to it, because I got there in 1970, and you were 2 years after me, and then last you were 2 years after Teddy. Because this was also one of, to me, when I was talking to Tim, you know, and about this, and Todd too, Rosalie had a superpower in addition to hearing songs, and I would say right now, while those songs were playing, there was probably hardly any guys singing along with the lyrics. You're bopping and you're doing this and all that stuff, but women at concerts would actually be singing the songs because they know the lyrics. Rosie, at that point, when I got there in 1970, she was only sort of separated and divorced maybe a year and a half, 2 years, somewhere in there. So it was, you know, I saw it firsthand, and you know, as the time went by, she got better at either, you know, went by the wayside to some degree, or hit it better or whatever, but she heard lyrics at a whole different level than most people would, for sure, more than a guy, would ever hear those lyrics. So you'd go in, I think, you know, because that brought me back for the Gladys Knight, because I hung out an enormous amount of time in the music library, and, you know, and Bev is probably out there too, Bev Merrill, who worked with Rosie in the library. You'd come around the corner, you know, coming in from, you know, Ron Foster's office around the other side, and you go in, and she'd have the Gladys Knight song on, either one of us, you know, and it's all about, you know, breaking up, but no one wants to say it, and you know it's over, and all that sort of stuff. And she would be playing it, and she would, this is what she would do all the time. Holiday, come here. You know, she had certain mannerisms, which were cool. But from my vantage point at that point, it was like you could see that there was a whole other element going on there that certainly a guy, PD or music director would never have, and you know, and most women would never have it either. And you know, I think that just kept right on going, and also made her incredibly special at picking out songs. But she's picking out at 6 levels at once when everybody else is working on 2. And you know, we just don't have that ability to do stuff like that. Yeah.
It's amazing too how music is almost medication for if you're going through something emotionally. Sometimes the songs put your thoughts and feelings into a way that your brain even can't. And would you say that was probably part of the golden ear, because she was listening kind of through that filter of what she was going through in her life?
Yeah.
Speaking of, you know, Rosalie's unique ability to hear a hit, we're going to play a little montage here of some of Rosalie's biggest hits, which are linked to a lot of really great stories too. Some of Rosalie's biggest hits that she heard right here. It's amazing what music can do to you, I swear, but you know, just listening and seeing, I was watching the audience get into it and seeing everyone up here listening and closing their eyes, it's amazing how it triggers memories and brings you right back to that day. And some of those songs, you know, she had the golden ear. What was it she looked for in a record, do you think? And I'll open up to anybody who wants. What was it she looked for? Because I know it was her golden ear, but there was a bit of mathematics there too as well. But what was that magic perfect potion she looked for in a song?
2 minutes and 45 seconds.
The great songs were too short, the bad ones were too long. I think she was listening for a hit. I think that's what was going in her emotions and her heart and her soul and her ears. She's looking for a hit. And there's a big difference between a stiff and a hit. And I think she had an ear for hearing hits. Rosalie probably would have been unbelievable in a major record company running the A&R department. She would have been incredible. She stayed at CK.
This wasn't just about her saying, I like these songs. She listened, she had something bigger in her mind saying, yeah, I like this, or yeah, I don't, but this still might work. Did she take many risks with songs thinking, I think it's a hit, but how was she as a risk taker when picking songs?
Well, I think she took risks with songs, especially we had to with Canadian content. But for example, with Skylark from Victoria and Vancouver, it was an interracial group in
Foster.
72.
So we got to start with Skylark.
Yeah, and she got the album, played Wildflower for over 3 months from the album, and it was Canadian content. But Rosalie was playing Canadian content before the rule came about in January of '71, because she played Gordon Lightfoot and Murray. I mean, she was on it already, and Guess Who too. But that song, she played it, and then the record company came out with a different song. They didn't even release Wildflower. They released something else that made it to number 66 in Canada. And they said, this is crazy, let's release Wildflower, because the Big A kept playing the song. We never stopped playing Wildflower, and it came out, and that was a monster song across Canada.
Tim, what
You
did
know, another thing, I think her ear was tuned to what would sound good, not on the radio, but on CKLW. What's it going to sound? Playing it in your office on those GB L1100s or whatever is neat, But there's a difference in going out in your car and cranking it up and hearing it on the car when you're moving down the road. That song feels and sounds different. And I think she had the sensibility to feel that when she listened to the song. What's that going to sound like on CK?
Something about hear it on the radio, so there's nothing like it.
It's different.
What did she listen to at home, Tim?
Well, it's funny, I had dinner with Pat and Ted on Friday night, and Nancy, Ted's wife, asked me that. And the reality is, you know, because she worked with music all day and listened to music all day, Mom personally didn't listen to a lot of music at home. But what she did do was listen to what her kids were listening to. She raised the three of us in a very, very small home in Riverside here in Windsor, probably less than 1,200 square feet. And my sister and I especially, but also Todd, like we were all music heads. I was a rock kid, Diane was into Sean Cassidy and Leif Garrett and all of that. But, you know, she listened to what we were listening to. And I think that, you know, she was always tuned in. And I remember her saying to me one time, you know, if I like something and it connects with me, I can't be the only one, so I need to put this on the radio and have other people connect with it as well. So she was just really tuned in. She really felt that the radio station needed to be a reflection of what was happening in pop culture. And the one point that I want to make here, because we just listened to a bunch of great R&B music, the one thing that Rosalie very consciously did, especially at the beginning of the 70s, as society was changing, you know, there was a Vietnam War, R&B music was changing, you know, Motown was evolving from being less about, you know, real perfected 2.5 to 3 minute pop songs. All of a sudden you had the Temptations singing about Ball of Confusion, Psychedelic Shack, and then in 1971, Marvin Gaye comes along with this absolutely monumental, socially conscious record called What's Going On. And I can tell you for a fact that Motown wasn't sure what to do with that record because it wasn't heard through the grapevine. It wasn't a typical Marvin Gaye record. And they were kind of afraid about how that record was going to be responded to by the public. And because Motown was still at that point located in Detroit, the Motown promotion people brought that record over and they wanted to know if Rosalie thought this record was commercially viable. And I can tell you that as soon as she heard What's Going On, after what had happened in Detroit with the riots of '67, you know, CKLW was really a bridge between two countries. As I said this morning at the statue unveiling, Mom felt that the world absolutely needed to hear what Marvin Gaye had to say in what was going on, that it was socially conscious. It was a great song to her ears, but people needed to hear it.
All the songs we're listening to tonight have amazing stories linked to them. We're going to get to some really interesting stories that never get old a little bit later on. Right now, you know, talking a lot of R&B, I want to play a little bit of rock and roll. You guys want to hear some rock and roll right now? Cross and rock over the top 40. Here's a couple rock tracks for you. Wow, some rock and roll right there.
I want to hear that radio station.
Yeah, what radio station is that? It sounds amazing. Tim, you said you had a story about...
I got a funny story. I got to jump in here for a quick second. So Aerosmith, you know, they were obviously a rock band getting played on the rock stations in Detroit, WRIF, WABX, and Rosalie really kind of led the way in crossing over to Top 40 Radio with Dream On. So they had played a couple smaller venues in Detroit. All of a sudden they blow up and they play Cobo Hall and they sell out. And of course, like a lot of groups that, you know, where Big 8 was the catalyst in crossing them over, Mom got invited to the show, and of course she brought myself and my brother. I think Diane was probably still too young at this point, but after the concert, all the big wigs had come in from CBS Records in New York, and they had an after party at the Playboy Club in Detroit. Somehow, Now, it was a private party, so the club was closed, but we got invited to go to the private party, and Todd was in grade 7 at that point. I was probably in grade 9 or 10. And Steve and Tyler, of course, wanted to meet Rosalie, and it was a great night. And the next morning, Mom gets a call from our junior high school. Mrs. Trombley? Yes. This is the principal at Edith Cavell. You have a son, Todd, who goes to school here? Yes. He's selling swag from the Playboy Club in Detroit. Do you know anything about this? And this is a true story. Todd, where are you? This is a true story. So, suffice to say, Todd was grounded for a while, but, it was really cool growing up with a rock and roll mom. We had a lot of great memories together. That's one of them right there.
That is a rock and roll story right there, for sure.
We just heard the Stones. Tim was telling us a story about the Stones. Do the Stones story for this.
Okay, so the Stones, Brown Sugar, I don't know, was that 71, 72? So back in the day when there were actually record stores, okay, there were independent, what we called rack jobbers. So they kind of looked after what were referred to back then as the mom and pop stores, not the major chain stores. They serviced all the independent record retailers. There was one in Detroit that was run by Jack and Linda Millman, very famous family from Miami. Anyhow, they received early copies of the single for Brown Sugar. They weren't supposed to, they couldn't put it in the stores, but my mom had a really good relationship with record retailers in Detroit, and of course, Jack called mom up on a Saturday morning to say, Rosalie, we've got copies of Brown Sugar. Now it's embargoed until Monday morning, but if you want to get the scoop, we've got it. Do you want to meet at the station today and maybe get a jump on it? And like, I remember this clear as day, getting in Mom's beat up Volkswagen Beetle, driving down to the station. The station was still on Riverside Drive at that point. We walked in, and as soon as Mom heard those opening riffs, it was like, boom. There was a person in the engineering department, in the production department. She's like, cart that up. This is going on the radio immediately. Within an hour, that song was on the air, and by Monday morning, the request lines had blown up, and the rest is history. One of the biggest top 40 singles ever. Wow.
Were radio stations afraid of rock and roll at all? You mentioned something yesterday, Les, we were talking, saying they used to want a day part and you couldn't play a certain song if it was heavy after a certain time. What was it like breaking it up? Like some of the songs we heard there, MC5, Santana, Deep Purple, The Stones, Aerosmith, The Foreigner. Some of it's like heavier stuff. Were radio stations afraid of that music?
A lot of radio stations were doing this day parting. They assumed that old housewives listened in the middle of the day. You can't play rock and roll there. And they had all these stupid ideas. I didn't believe in day parting. A hit is a hit is a hit. I don't care what time you hear it. So I was adamantly against day parting, and that was never my thing. If you're going to play it, play it.
Was Rosalie a fan of rock and roll?
Oh yeah, she loved rock. She loved everything. If it was a great song, it didn't matter where it came from or what it was. She just had an ear for a great song. And that's one of the things that I think it's really important to touch on tonight. Mom was a legend, will always be a legend. What happened today has been so amazing. But I want everybody to understand, and I tried to convey this morning, there are 3 other legends sitting up here tonight too, right? So, the music that was played on the radio station was only as great as the programming that went on behind the scenes. And these jocks, these legends that are up here with us tonight, that made the magic. Because truly, as a kid growing up there, I feel so blessed. I had a 25-year career on the records label side of the business, and growing up at this radio station had such a profound effect on me as a kid that I just have to say that,
one of the things that's so important to convey tonight, there's a lot of people that if they were still with us would be here tonight as well, like Brother Bill Gable, like Johnny Williams, like Tommy Shannon. It was a family of amazingly talented people. It was not just the music and Rosalie's gift, but it was the jocks, it was the jingles, it was the programming, it was the hot clock, when records were played. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention tonight, if we didn't talk about how the station was actually formatted, and the fact that the news was at 20 after the hour and 20 to the hour, when most radio stations in the market were playing new or programming news at the top and the bottom of the hour. If you were listening to the Big 8, it swept through the top of the hour and it swept through the bottom. And that's just one of the elements of what made it so amazing. The jingles, but I want to recognize these gentlemen that are up here with us tonight that have taken the time to come in from across North America to be here. Mom loved them, they loved Mom, and it was a combination of all the elements that made the magic. And that's very important for us all to recognize that.
When you listen to the radio, you don't think that there's a little bit of science and studying the culture and the socialization, the music, and how that science and art have to be blended perfectly. And that's what CKLW was. I was talking to the guys yesterday, and it dawned on me, I'd forgotten about it actually. And the clocks, as we used to call them, the format wheel, the clock, and the way the hour was just so meticulously programmed, and what happened in, between this and that, and the timing, and what you say, and how you do what's called quarter-hour maintenance in the science end of the whole thing. And we had these magic clocks, as we called them. I took those clocks to Boston. I took them to San Francisco. Those were the exact same clocks we developed here at CKLW. I left radio for 2 years and went with Atlantic Records, a pretty good record company. I did that for a couple of years, and then we thought of putting music on television 24 hours a day. And the MTV, to me, was a radio station you could see. It was CKLW. You could see it. The clocks were the same clocks. When you watch the early years of MTV, when it was music television, remember those days? It was a radio station. It was just a radio station you could see. You didn't have to sit and watch it like a sitcom. You could cruise around your house and have it on in the background. You could even have it hooked into your stereo system. And it was a great radio station. And I learned all of that right here.
Well, circling back to what Tim said, we are honored to be here. We thank you and Todd and Diane for inviting us to be here and be a part of this just wonderful day for Rosalie. And the only thing permanent in life is change. And we all change, and that's normal, but we're not normal. But like Rosalie, we all fell in love with this wild, wacky, wonderful entertainment music business. We love radio, and we branched out into other things since then, but we all loved it, and Rosalie did too. And I think, like Les mentioned earlier, I think the good Lord gave her a gift, really, to hear music and to decipher in her mind and heart whether that was going to be a hit or not. You know, coming from what she had to go through with a single mom with 3 small children, having to work, you know, and raise them, that was a lot of pressure on her at that age. And I think she did an awesome job with all of you.
You know, it's funny, we've all been at a bunch of different radio stations, and this one really was, when you, at the time we're all kids, we don't know anything, you're just assuming this is the way all big stations must be. If I went to Chicago, it would be the same inside. but none of them are. They're nothing like this thing. I went to New York for a while, for 2-3 years, and I was like, wow, this sucks compared to here. And I came back, but the first thing that this is where I'll go with where this is an anomaly. I get to New York, ORFM, it's another Drake station, it's Times Square. And the first thing that the operators, the people who do the board ops, on the other side of the screen, when we're talking and you point and hit the song or jingle or whatever, they're there. The first thing that the ops come up and how do you put those under, how do you do those lay under things? How do they physically do that? Which would be a jingle is playing and the start of a song is starting under the jingle. It just makes the station move way faster. It's like putting your foot on the gas pedal and revving the tires at a stop sign and goodbye. And they're in New York City with a million stations and they're listening to us trying to copy it. And the chief engineer here, Ed Budabaugh was hands down
A genius.
hands down the best chief engineer on the planet pretty much. And then it's like, okay, you got a great PD, you got some jocks that are pretty decent, and you got this awesome engineer. What about the newsroom? In the newsroom, there's a guy that he just sold 3 million records and was, doing the Dallas Cowboys halftime thing with the Americans. It's like, and the newsroom was awesome in itself, and 22, 24 people in there, which is unheard of for a radio station. And no matter where you went in the radio station, it didn't matter, producers, people, cut and take, people in the traffic department, everybody was like, you're having fun, and you show up to throw, you're a baseball team, and you show up to throw no-hitters. 5 hits, no, that's not good enough. I want a no-hitter, and that's kind of the level it was at. And again, I just assumed that's the way it was until I left. It was like, this was nowhere near what that was. Yeah, it was fascinating, actually. But man, that's rare. It just, extremely rare. Yeah.
The news was the news, but the news was also entertainment. I mean, the legends that worked there, starting with Dick Smythe, Byron McGregor, Randall Carlisle, John Belmar, they're legends in their own right, man. It was like the news was entertainment. Grant Hudson, the news was entertainment as well.
All the other radio stations were boring.
It blows my mind the history that we have here, that New York City stations were listening to what we were doing here in Windsor, that the clock from CKLW was used for the launch of MTV. That blows my mind that so much of that links back to here and we don't celebrate it enough.
You mentioned Eddie Budabaugh. I love that guy. And we were all, and I mean, this engineer took it seriously. I mean, a tube meant something to him. And it had to be a special kind of a tube because it would bring the bottom in and you'd sound like a big bad dog. And rumble and this and that. Who would think of putting the radio station in the tunnel going under the river? Eddie Budabaugh thought of that. It was absolutely brilliant. One day he says to me, hey Garland, let's go drive the signal. Let's go what? Drive the signal. I thought this was some new exotic drug or something. What the hell is that? No, pack your bags. We're going to leave for a few days. Okay, we get 2 boom boxes and put them in the trunk. We go through the border and the American customs agents are wondering where the heck we're going with these 2 boom boxes and what are you guys up to? Well, we're going to go drive the signal. What does that mean? That's when I learned that means we're going to go tune to 800 and drive as far as we can until we can't hear it anymore. We were out for 3 days driving, I don't even know how many thousands of miles, listening to this monster radio station. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was like, wow, no one has ever said, let's go drive the signal. You would do that at CK. I survived.
Speaking of the amazing playlist and the mix that Rosie would put together, I want to play a bit of pop music right about now and just feel the vibe from some of these pop songs. Here we go.
That's when music was music. Man, I was thinking a minute ago about one of my favorite songs Rosalie ever came running in with. I don't even know if it went on to be a hit, but it sure was at CK. If you remember this, please, let me know. I Want to Do Something Freaky to You by Leon Haywood. What a song! We played that. I didn't know what Do Something Freaky now.
But one thing about the music we just heard, Rosalie was so much detail-oriented for researching songs, and we played the whole gamut of, you know, but she did have, like I mentioned earlier, she had a heart for R&B and soul, and she had a place in her heart for Diana Ross. She couldn't hardly resist when any Diana Ross song came out. She almost had to put it on to give it a shot. But you can see she played songs that were, you know, not the normal, but they were popular and the audience loved them. They were all researched from, you know, requests, music sales, album sales. I mean, it was amazing what she was doing in that music library.
How was that for you as DJs, you know, going from Wayne Newton to Foreigner? Like... to Convoy. Can we talk about Convoy?
What do you follow that with?
Oh yeah, nights were tough. When you would get, like Candyman, I used to get a little crazy when that came on the air, but I loved to shout when Kung Fu Fighting came on. You know, I would, you know, because Brother Bill Gable and I were taking karate at the same time. And we were both going crazy over that. But when we played earlier that montage with Barry White in it, Brother Bill had that just natural deep voice like Les, although Les is deeper than Brother Bill. But Brother Bill would get real deep, you know, and try to, it would sound almost like Barry White when he introduced the record, you know. And
you know what else you guys remember? I think we probably in some of our meetings we figured this out. Most program director, music directors, people who ran pop stations believed in these beautiful segues. We fell in love with train crashes.
They stick out.
Train crashes are okay.
Yeah.
That makes people go, wow, that's cool. You know, it's all right.
Yeah. That's a pretty wide berth that we've heard tonight already. That's an incredibly wide berth. Let me tell you another story. I had that, oddly, living here, but I was in the U.S. National Guard while I was living here. I had to fly back, you know, every weekend. And once a year, you'd have to go for 2 weeks in up by the Thousand Islands, except on the other side of the water in New York. So I go there because Barry White just kind of, we heard the Barry White song. So Barry White, you know, first song comes out, and we're playing it here, and I think nothing of it. But the stations there in Watertown, New York, were horrible. Oh my God, they were horrible. So I made a whole bunch of cassettes in real time. They just put them on, and they just go for, you know, an hour on each side. And so I'm taking them there, and so I take them. And I'm in the barracks there, and I'm playing CK, and there's people coming in continually. Like, what's that? I can't get that on the dial. Where's that station? And in the barracks next door to us, because the entire Eastern Seaboard, a whole division would come in there was a predominantly black company that came in from New York City. And, you know, they're listening, and they're constantly, what's that? What's that? Well, who's that guy? And it's the Barry White song. And I said, well, this is Barry White. Who's that? You never heard this song? And anyway, I come to realize that we were almost 2 months ahead of major New York City radio stations playing that, and other songs in there too, like I Want to Do Something Freaky to You, so, you know, that kind of stuff. And it was like, how could that possibly be? But that's kind of the way it was here, which is, again, really rare.
You know, Pat, you just mentioned something I remember. There were bootleg cassettes of CKLW flying all over the world. People would come to town and hear that radio station and go, you've got to hear this radio station. And they would record it. These bootleg air checks were all over the place. That's how monumentally great CKLW was. They don't do that
before we downloaded music, we sat there with our finger on the record button, waiting for the song to come on, and then you clicked it. And sometimes you hoped, oh please DJ, don't talk too much over the opening. and you'd have that song, it's like, they're talking over the first 5 seconds, but that's how we got our music back then. It was that song you heard on the radio. Yeah, very easy.
Now, Brother
No
Bill
one has
Gable,
anything to say.
again, Brother Bill Gable was the only jock I ever heard that introduced Papa was a Rolling Stone all the way up. He talked that
It
up.
had to be 30 seconds.
Oh, at least.
Amazing. Some stories here. I know the stories that never get old. I want to open it up, and there's some good ones here. We're gonna play one more little montage of some of these songs that are linked to some stories, and then we're gonna break out some stories linked to people like Kiss, like Queen, like Bob Seger, like Alice Cooper. Let's play some music. Really quickly, so I want to make I made an observation as the film was getting out. How many people were at the Radio Revolution screening tonight? Yes. I was watching people come out of the screening and just kind of hearing the conversations. And there's a gentleman right up in the front row who I'm pointing at right now with the hat on who's been rocking out all night here tonight. And as he was coming to the theater, he said, how wild that happened, that the Big 8 happened here and we were there listening and we were a part of it. And I thought that was just a really cool moment. I was eavesdropping. I'm sorry if that creeps you out. but it struck a nerve with me how music really does connect us all. And I gotta say, it's so cool sitting in this room right now, listening to music with you and with all of you here tonight. I feel like a very lucky person, the stories behind them, and that's what we're gonna get to right now. But it's how awesome is just sitting listening to music with people and letting them bring it back. It's a trip, it really is, and nothing compares to it at all. But that song we heard right there that people were just bopping away to, Queen, crazy little thing called Love, Tim, I believe you have a bit of a story about this track.
Yeah, so Queen were ironically on the label that I worked for almost 25 years, EMI Music, but in North America, Queen was on Electra Asylum. So I had gone to England in the fall of 1979 to visit a friend that had moved back home. And of course, the BBC One to me was like the Big 8. I'd never heard anything like the Big 8 here in North America, but the BBC One in the UK like played everything. And I heard a bunch of stuff for the first time. I heard the Police for the first time. But I was a huge Queen fan, and again, Mom led the way on crossing Queen over from the rock stations on the top 40. But this song, Crazy Little Thing Called Love, was never going to be a single in North America because Electra Asylum, their label for North America, thought the song was way outside of this artistic symphonic rock band that they had broken in America. It was never going to be a single. So I brought a couple copies of the single back with me from the UK. I was working at the radio station part-time, and I came in for my shift on a Friday, and at that point, Brother Bill Gable was a program director, and I played it for my mom and Brother Bill. And first listen, of course, Rosalie's like, this is a smash. We're putting it on the radio. The head of promotion for Electra Asylum was a fellow by the name of Kenny Batiste, who was one of the only promotion people really that Mom, he got close to the family away from the actual station. He, like Pat for me, he was like a big brother. He was a really cool guy from the east side of Detroit. And Mom called him up Friday afternoon and said, Kenny, like, Tim just got back from the UK. He brought this Queen song with him. Like, why aren't you guys putting it out? And basically Kenny said, Rosalie, it's way outside of what, we want them to be in North America. So we declined putting it out because it was going to be on a greatest hits record in Europe and the rest of the world. So again, much like the Stones situation or Benny and the Jets, where the station, because of my mom, our mom, put it on the air. Over the weekend, the request lines blew up, and by the beginning of the following week, Electra Asylum was trying to figure out how to get the record pressed up and get it serviced across North America. And it went on to be one of the biggest Queen singles in their history in terms of top 40 radio, in terms of crossover hits. And listen, I would be remiss, you heard in that mix the the Kiss song, Beth. Okay, so the inside story on that, I'd like my sister, who's here in the audience somewhere, Diane, if you could come up and quickly tell us that story, because it's a really cool story as well. Come on up, Diane. Diane was the Kiss fan in the Hugs. They weren't cool enough for her older brother.
Firstly, I want to say thanks to everyone for coming out tonight. And
Thank you.
you guys, you have, you've warmed my heart more than you'll ever know. So, Tim's right. When Mom came home from work, on Reedmere, there was the big picture window in the living room, and there were 2 small coffee tables in the middle and 2 love seats flanking each side on either side. Okay, and there were bookshelves that she had made that were on the other side of the couches, but she would lay on the couch with her feet up and read the paper, because she never had time in the morning. She wanted to relax and read the paper. Very often, her feet were folded, the slippers were falling off her feet, and she was tired. But, you know, we would run around upstairs, do whatever we were doing. Tim was listening to music. I never had to go to a record store when I was a kid. My mom came home with her purse full of music, okay? You know, I don't know if any of you grew up in Riverside and Halloween. Mom didn't give out candy, she gave out 45s. Did you get one? Anyone? Okay? She did that. She did that. So, right? So, 1976, I'm 11 years old. I'm hearing records out of Tim's room, like all kinds of, you know, Jethro Tull, Queen, The Cars, lots of rock. I was getting into rock. I'd left my teeny bopper phase and, you know, was venturing into rock and roll. And the Destroyer record came out. My mom said, here, you know, here it is. I couldn't wait to hear it. Ran upstairs, threw it on my record player, and there were 3 songs that stood out to me on that record. The first one was Detroit Rock City, sung by Gene Simmons. Good song, killer intro. That song rocked. Okay? Then the next one was Shout It, Shout It, Shout It Out Loud. Okay? Paul Stanley. Okay, great song. But Beth, I mean, come on. It was the instrumentation. I don't know if you guys know that Bob Ezrin, who was featured in the Rise and Fall of the Big A, he was the producer on that record. And, you know, Peter was doing the vocals on that record. And, you know, he realized that the guys really couldn't play that well. So he decided to call up somebody, and he got the New York Philharmonic Orchestra to come in and play the pretty, you know, everything that you hear in that song is really the orchestra. And Peter Criss, who really did not have his moment until that song. And so I listened to it and listened to it and listened to it, and there was no denying the specialness of that song. It was a slow song, and I just loved it. So I went downstairs and, Mom, there's a slow song on a Kiss record. Like, my mom said, oh, is there? I said, yeah. I said, it's really, really, really good. And, you know, I guess, surely there were promo guys working her on the single as well. But anyway, it came to pass. CKLW started to play it. It became a hit. What happens as the band is touring for the Destroyer album? And this gave Peter Criss his moment, because he left his drum kit and would come down and sit on a stool and sing his song. And it was a beautiful song. So it kind of elevated his presence within the band. As a thank you, the band was coming to town, and Mom said, would you like to meet them? Oh, Mom, yes, I'd like to meet Kiss. So, went over to the Pontchartrain in Detroit. Don't know if it's still called the Pontchartrain. What's it called? Well, I think Tim says it was the Rock and Roll Hotel at the time in the 70s, but yeah, so we had dinner on the top floor. And when we got there, the band was not there. And somebody said, oh, hey guys, the band's gonna be coming down in about 5 minutes. Be ready. So suddenly, the elevator doors open. The guys come streaming out, and it was just them. There was no entourage with them. It was the 4 guys without their makeup on. Okay? No, I didn't run. They all had kazoos in their mouth, and the tune they were playing was Yankee Doodle Dandy. I was spellbound. I did not know that I would be having dinner beside Gene Simmons that night, which I did. I remember Gene ate chicken and salad. He ate very healthfully for dinner. He seemed to care about what he was eating. I'd never met anyone who kind of was asking how the chicken had been prepared and how he liked his vegetables crunchy and not soggy, that kind of thing. I would not call Gene a handsome man. The only one that had a little bit of lipstick on that night was Paul Stanley. And it was this bright red, perfectly applied lipstick. He had no shirt on, but a vest. Ladies, when I tell you that he was a sexy man, he was very sexy. Well, and as well that night, Mom kept saying, come on, you gotta talk, you know, you don't get to meet people like this all the time. And I was just tongue-tied. But I wanted to meet Peter because for me, Peter became the pivotal guy in Kiss. So he was over against the wall with a woman. And I went over and said hello, and he introduced me to a woman, but her name wasn't Beth, her name was Lydia. And that's who he wrote the song Beth for.
Now, here's not to jump in, Diane, but here's again, because it was asked earlier, what did Mom listen to at home?
Right.
She listened to what we were listening to. Beth was never intended to be a single.
It wasn't intended.
Beth was the song on the album that the band allowed Peter to sing to kind of, you know, assuage him, make him feel like he was part of the band. So my sister heard that song as a hit, and again, it was one of their biggest singles.
It worked. It worked, and I'm glad that it did.
That's really cool.
And I do remember, I asked Gene for his autograph, and Gene was, you know, they all signed my autograph book, and he had recently started putting a $ in S in the Simmons, in the S on Simmons, and he looked at my mom and said, oh, you know, sometimes I forget how I spell my last name. And Mom said, well, maybe that happens, but I'll bet you never forget that $ now, do ya? And he looked at her and he said, that's right, I don't, I'm a businessman. And he meant it, he meant it. His intelligence surprised me. And his confidence, his swagger, Gene had that in spades. And he asked me, where are you guys sitting? Coming to the show tomorrow night? I said, yes. He said, where are you sitting? Mom said, 5th row center. He said, listen, if there's anybody bugging you, point them out, I'll spit blood on them.
That is rock and roll right there. That is rock and roll. So is Kiss playing a kazoo without makeup to Yankee Doodle Dandy. That's pretty rock and roll as well.
I'm intrigued by one thing. You were tongue-tied?
I was.
I'd like to see Gene Simmons tie his tongue.
Amazing. Diane and I, our community that you've come out tonight to honor Rosalie. These gentlemen are here. They've come in again from across North America to honor Rosalie. There's a few people that are here tonight that I'd also like to acknowledge because we put a lot of work into this night, into the music selections that you heard tonight. My brother Todd, who is here tonight, literally probably spent 100 hours going through the Big 30 charts from 68 all the way through the 70s. The songs that you heard us play tonight in these montages weren't played by accident, okay? These were songs that Todd, through his research, followed up the chart from Hitbound. Most of them ended up as #1 records, if not #1. They landed in the top 5. So to Todd, thank you for putting in the effort. And there's a fella who's here tonight that works with me at the casino on the production team for the Coliseum, David Saran. He put these amazing montages together. So David, thank you. And again, I know there's a number of alumni that are here tonight that have stuck around, that have been here for the weekend. It's been a great weekend of stories, everybody getting together, reminiscing, remembering Rosalie. Jojo, I see, is sitting out there. We're just so grateful that everybody has been here today to celebrate such an amazing woman. So on that, I would like to say to everybody, thank you tonight. Thank you for the day. It's been an absolutely joyful day, one of the best days of certainly my life, and I'm sure Todd and Diane feel the same. Thank you, everybody.